Imagine standing at the edge of the world, the wind carving blades of ice across your skin, your army shivering behind you, waiting for a command that might lead them to glory or bury them beneath a mountain of snow. Imagine trusting allies who smile as they sharpen their knives. Imagine fighting not just legions, but the landscape itself, a landscape that has swallowed entire peoples without leaving a trace. This is not myth. This is the true story of Hannibal Barca, Rome's most feared enemy, who led an army and elephants into the unforgiving jaws of the Alps, against every warning, every prediction, and every imaginable odd. Before we jump into today's story, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Follow me as we uncover the hidden battles, secrets, and legends of history that textbooks never tell you. Long before Hannibal commanded armies, he was a child in a courtyard in Carthage, standing beside the ashes of a father's pride. Hamilcar Barca, embittered by Carthage's humiliating defeat in the First Punic War, believed Rome would never allow Carthage to rise again. He had seen the Republic's appetite for expansion, its hunger for dominance, its quiet insistence that all rivals eventually kneel. So he placed his young son's hand upon a stone, etched with Rome's name, and demanded an oath: eternal hostility, eternal resistance. Hannibal spoke the words with a child's voice, but the conviction behind them chilled the witnesses. That vow, born of political humiliation and a father's unbroken will, would shape the course of the ancient world. As Hannibal grew, he studied Rome with an intensity bordering on obsession. Rome's armies, Rome's alliances, Rome's arrogance. He came to believe, as his father had, that the Republic planned not coexistence but conquest. When Hamilcar died, Hannibal inherited not only Iberian territory, but a mission: to challenge the power that threatened Carthage's future. That oath became his compass, his burden, and ultimately the spark that ignited one of history's most daring campaigns. Hannibal's march from Iberia began with optimism. Thousands of infantry, expert cavalry, seasoned officers. But the land itself reminded him that power alone did not command loyalty. The region was a patchwork of tribal alliances built on shifting sands. To Gauls and Iberians, loyalty was transactional. Outsiders were welcome one day, betrayed the next, depending on who paid more or who threatened more convincingly. Some tribes greeted Hannibal warmly, offering feasts, escorts, and promises of friendship. Yet many of these same chiefs had just entertained Roman envoys. They watched Hannibal's growing column with fascination and fear. A foreign army marching toward the Alps meant opportunity, profit for some, danger for many. Treachery came quickly, celebrations disguised ambushes. Guides disappeared the night before a crucial crossing. Allies sold Carthaginian soldiers to Romans for gold or favors. Hannibal responded with swift, strategic retaliation, burning the villages of oathbreakers, replacing treacherous leaders with more cooperative rivals. But each encounter chipped away at the army's security. To Hannibal, these tribes were not villains. They were survivors in a world where foreign armies appeared like seasonal storms. Their duplicity was politics, not malice. Still, every betrayal was a warning. If the approach to the Alps was already perilous, the mountains themselves would be far worse. In this land, a handshake was never just a handshake. It was a wager, one Hannibal had no choice but to accept. As the army advanced toward Gaul, the sheer spectacle of Hannibal's forces became a moving symbol of Carthaginian ambition. Infantry marched in disciplined ranks. Numidian cavalry fluttered across the fields like swift shadows. But it was the elephants, massive North African beasts, armored for war, that seized the imagination and fear of all who saw them. To tribes who had never encountered such creatures, the elephants appeared supernatural. Living siege towers, alien giants whose very presence shifted the balance of negotiations. Some chiefs submitted immediately. Others plotted ways to exploit or challenge the beasts. Inside Hannibal's camp, however, the elephants inspired a more complicated mixture of awe and dread. They were powerful, yet unpredictable. Even the handlers approached them carefully. One panic, one misstep, could crush friend and foe alike. Their rumbling calls echoed across nighttime camps, unsettling horses and soldiers alike. Superstitious murmurs spread through the ranks. that the gods might punish those who brought desert creatures into forbidden highlands. Rome's scouts observed these movements with growing alarm. Reports of elephants marching through Gaul reached the Senate, fueling both disbelief and unease. But fear traveled in more than one direction. As the army approached the Rhône, Hannibal's officers wondered whether these beasts, so useful in battle, could survive the brutal terrain ahead. The mountains did not care about spectacle. They cared about weight, footing, cold, and endurance. Still, Hannibal pressed on. The psychological war had begun long before he reached Italy, and elephants were his opening blow. Whether they would remain assets or become liabilities was a question only the Alps could answer. The Rhône appeared before the army as a wide, furious torrent, a barrier more daunting than any tribe. For Hannibal's plan to succeed, he needed to cross it swiftly before Roman forces arrived. No ancient army had transported elephants across such a river. Some officers insisted it was impossible. Hannibal ignored impossibility. He ordered shipwrights to seize every vessel along the banks and instructed his engineers to build massive rafts weighted with earth and brush to stabilize the elephants. The work was frantic. Tribesmen watched from the opposite shore, uncertain whether to attack or negotiate. At dawn, the crossing began. Infantry rode into fog, shields raised, expecting arrows that never came. The river churned, swallowing boats whole. Men clung to oars with white knuckles, but they made progress. Then came the elephants. Some balked at the shifting rafts. Others panicked and plunged into the water. To the soldiers' astonishment, many elephants swam, using their trunks as natural snorkels, pushing through currents that could drown a man in seconds. Several reached the far bank alive. Others were swallowed by the water, a miracle and a warning. The men cheered their success, but the loss of elephants and supplies shadowed the celebration. If a river could nearly break them, what would the mountains do? The Alps waited, silent and indifferent, as Hannibal's army regrouped on the far shore, cold, soaked, and aware that they had just passed the first true test of their impossible mission. The mountains rose ahead like a fortress forged by nature. Jagged peaks cloaked in snow, cliffs carved by wind and time. To the soldiers, the Alps did not look like terrain to be crossed. They looked like a warning carved into the sky. The initial ascent was deceptively beautiful. Meadows dotted with late autumn flowers and distant shepherd huts offered a final glimpse of civilization. But as the army climbed, the world shifted. The air thinned, winds intensified, paths narrowed to ledges barely wider than a man's foot. Mules brayed and slipped. Soldiers tightened their grips on spears and prayer charms. Then came the fog. Thick, white, and disorienting, it swallowed the army whole. Men marched blind, arms outstretched, praying they would not step into emptiness. Voices echoed unnaturally. Thunderous cracks of falling rock sent tremors of panic through the ranks. Gaulish tribes used this moment to strike. Arrows rained from unseen heights. Warriors hurled stones, triggered slides, and vanished into the mist before the Carthaginians could react. These tribes were not allies of Rome. They were defenders of their mountains. Hannibal's presence threatened winter stores, grazing land, and autonomy. Their resistance was not political, it was survival. The soldiers felt the mountains closing in. Fear spread quietly, seeping into conversations, tightening like frost around morale. Yet Hannibal refused to stop. He rode through danger, rallying his men not with grand speeches, but with relentless presence. By nightfall, the army understood a chilling truth. They had entered a world where ambition meant nothing, where nature killed without thought, and where the mountains themselves were enemies. The crossing had truly begun. Salvation appeared in the form of a local tribe offering food, shelter, and a guide through a safer pass. Exhausted and starving, the army embraced the possibility of relief. Even Hannibal, though cautious, recognized that refusal might fracture morale. The tribe offered a feast, spoke of peace, and swore allegiance to Carthage. But their smiles were masks. As the army followed their guides into a narrow pass, warning signs appeared. Freshly shifted stones, restless animals, a sudden, unsettling stillness. Then the mountains erupted. Boulders cascaded from above. Arrows streaked through the air. Warriors attacked from both cliffs, exploiting every advantage the terrain offered. The pass became a slaughterhouse. Men tumbled into ravines. Elephants screamed in terror. Officers attempted to hold the line, but the narrow path offered no room to maneuver. This was not betrayal out of hatred. It was a calculated act of survival. By harming Hannibal, the tribe secured leverage over both Rome and neighboring clans. In Alpine politics, treachery was simply another tool. Hannibal forced his men forward, ordering shields up, elephants inward, formation tight. Step by brutal step, they pushed through the ambush. When they emerged on the other side, they had lost hundreds, and something more vital, trust. Hannibal declared that from this point forward, the mountains themselves would be treated as enemy territory. No more handshakes, no more escorts. They would rely only on themselves, and they continued upward. After the ambush, the army moved cautiously, nerves frayed to breaking. The mountains seemed to sense it. A silence settled, thick, unnerving, unnatural. Then came the crack. A thunderous roar tore across the cliffs. A wall of snow, rock, and ice plunged toward them with impossible speed. The avalanche swallowed men, animals, and supplies. Survivors clung to the mountainside, helpless as comrades vanished beneath the white. When the roar subsided, the landscape had changed entirely. Their retreat path was gone, buried under tons of debris. The army was trapped. Fear turned to despair. Firewood refused to burn in the thin air. Food spoiled. Wounds stiffened. Soldiers whispered that the gods opposed the march. Officers debated Hannibal's judgment. Even loyal veterans wondered whether their oath-bound commander had doomed them all. Hannibal walked among the men, speaking softly, acknowledging losses, offering presents instead of empty assurances. But even he must have felt the crushing weight of the truth. Nature had not merely attacked, it had sealed the exits. The Alps, cold and merciless, had become a prison. The only way was forward. The situation grew untenable until scouts brought word of an impossible solution, a narrow ridge clinging to a cliff, barely wider than a man's shoulders. No army had ever crossed it. It was less a path than a dare from the mountain. Hannibal examined it and made his decision. They would take it. Engineers led the way, carving footholds, anchoring stakes, and clearing ice with blows that sent stone shards tumbling into the abyss. More than one worker slipped and fell into the endless white. Their sacrifices became part of the path. The infantry followed in single file, each man forced to trust the footprints of the one before him. A misstep meant death. Snow began to fall, sharp, blinding, driven by wind that threatened to peel the army from the rock face. Then came the elephants. Blindfolded to calm them, they were guided inch by handlers murmuring to them like parents, soothing terrified children. The ridge shook beneath their weight. Some elephants stumbled, others froze entirely. Progress slowed to a crawl. Hannibal moved along the line, issuing steady, urgent orders. Not speeches, not theatrics. Just the raw discipline of a man refusing to let disaster win. When they finally reached broader ground, the men collapsed. Not in celebration, but in exhaustion and quiet disbelief. They had crossed terrain no general would have dared, but the cost was steep. Men and animals were missing. Supplies dwindled to desperation levels. Still, momentum, however fragile, returned. The mountains had not beaten them. Not yet. At last, the pass ended. Ahead lay northern Italy, bathed in sunlight, a world of fertile plains and Roman towns. The promised land Hannibal had sworn to reach. But between the army and that future stood the descent. Steep, broken, treacherous. The trail was little more than eroded mud and shattered stone. Mules slipped and fell. Soldiers dragged themselves downward using ropes, branches, anything that gave purchase on the slope. The worst obstacle came when they encountered a collapsed section of trail destroyed by a rock slide. Hannibal ordered fires built against the rock wall, heated the stone until it fractured, and then had his men pour vinegar into the cracks to split it further. An ancient engineering technique recorded by Polybius. With picks and hammers, they carved a new passage. The elephants followed last, bleeding from cracked feet, trembling from exhaustion. Yet they descended, driven by handlers who refused to abandon them. When the army finally reached level ground, they no longer looked like invaders. They looked like survivors of a catastrophe. But in their eyes, something had changed. Not weakness, a hardened resolve. They had endured ambushes, storms, avalanches, starvation, and despair. They had walked through a trial no Roman soldier had ever imagined, and they had reached Italy alive. Rumors spread quickly. A foreign general had descended from the Alps. He brought elephants. He had defied nature itself. Rome, for the first time, felt fear. Hannibal entered Italy not as a triumphant conqueror, but as the survivor of a crucible. His cloak was torn, his soldiers gaunt, his cavalry reduced, and the few remaining elephants limped behind him like living relics. To an outsider, the army seemed on the verge of collapse, but Rome saw something else entirely. They saw a commander who had accomplished what no one believed possible. They saw an army forged by suffering into a weapon more dangerous than numbers alone could measure. They saw a threat not just to their military, but to their identity. Roman scouts confirmed the truth. Hannibal was not rumor. He was reality. The Republic mobilized in panic. Consuls raised legions with unprecedented urgency. Senators argued, commanders quarreled, and Italian allies watched the unfolding crisis closely, weighing whether Rome could withstand the storm descending from the north. Then came the battles. At the Trebia River, Hannibal lured a larger Roman force into icy water and crushed it with superior tactics. At Lake Trasimene, he orchestrated an ambush so complete that the Roman army never understood they were surrounded until it was too late. At Cannae, he executed a maneuver so devastating that military academies still teach it today, encircling and destroying a force nearly twice his size. These victories were not miracles. They were the echo of what the army had endured in the Alps. Discipline forged under starvation, courage hardened by storms, unity shaped by suffering. The men believed that destiny favored them, and their belief made them formidable. Yet Hannibal also understood Rome. He knew that military victories alone might not topple the Republic. Rome's resilience was unparalleled. Its citizens rebuilt, reorganized, and refused to break. Italian allies hesitated to defect, unsure whether Carthage could replace Rome's power. Still, one fact could not be denied. Hannibal had changed the Republic. He forced Rome to abandon complacency, rethink its strategies, and confront the possibility of its own destruction. The Alps had not just tested Hannibal, they had transformed him into a commander whose presence alone shook the Mediterranean world. He had crossed more than a mountain. He had crossed into legend. And in doing so, he forced Rome, proud, disciplined, unconquered Rome, to feel something it had never felt before: fear. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe and dive into this playlist next. More untold stories of empires, warriors, and history-changing battles are just a click away.